This little look back at past conventions is based on photos that I took at the time. The intention is to focus on the people whilst giving a reminder of the places we visited on the outings. I'm very grateful to Andrew Hurst for help received in identifying some of the participants. The outing at this convention took us first to the National Media Museum in Bradford, where Philippa Wright showed us around the Kodak gallery, full of vintage equipment. Here she is talking to Mary Bryce. Peter Bryce is in the blue shirt. Amazing old cameras and magic lanterns. Here we have Hugh and Anita Willman, and left foreground Tony Russell. The afternoon visit was first to the Red House at Gomersall, and then to Oakham Hall at Birstall. Great entrance hall and gallery. Both of these houses had stunning period furniture. The outing in 2010 was first to the Shuttleworth collection at Old Warden. A collection of First World War aircraft, all still in flying condition. Outside the hangars, Barry Aldous sports an unusual photo rig. And a group of stereographers await developments. I can spot Joan Webb, Len Pollins, Hilary Bailey, Brendan Northover, Mary Paul, my wife Mary, John Northover, Anita Willman and Hendrika Mahan. And in this shot Fred Newton and Keith Webb have joined the group. The afternoon visit was to Rest Park, where I spotted Hugh and Anita Willman. This is the view down the Long Water. Colin and Judith Clay were just outside the doors of the Archer Pavilion. In the evening session, I was very honoured to be awarded the Martin Wilshire Trophy for technical expertise applied on behalf of the Society. Also at the evening session, my wife Mary with Anita and Hugh Willman. Vicky Feingold is behind. I was able to capture quite a few members during the programme sessions at Chesterfield. Here, Dave Robinson, Julius White, Bob Aldridge and Jeff Ogram. And Jeff Ogram again alongside a rather splendid taxiphote. And Jeff can't resist taking a peek into the taxiphote, watched by John Ralph. Here Julius White again, with Tony Holmes, who organised the Sunday outing, and Bob Aldridge. A lively discussion with John Taylor, Barry Aldous and Colin Clay. Robin Williams and Andrew Hurst prepare the projection kit, with Alan Butters taking a strong interest. Chairman Alan Cooper addresses the AGM, with plenty of chat during the subsequent break. Alan in discussion with Fred Newton. David Burder and Barry Aldous with Pat Whitehouse's daughter Anne and granddaughter Mari. Apparently Mari is following in her grandmother's footsteps with wildlife photography. The outing, organised by Tony Holmes, was to Critch Tramway. Here is a tram full of stereographers. On the left, Colin and Judith Clay, with Bob Aldridge a couple of seats back. Pat and Neville Jackson are at the rear sitting opposite one another. A similar view with Patricia Morton front left. Here Jeff Ogram, Mary Paul and Harry Atkinson are enjoying the vintage cars. The afternoon visit was to Lee Gardens, famous for rhododendrons and azaleas. Colin Metherill, Lance Potter and Mary Paul. Again, I was able to capture lots of members during the workshops and other sessions. Here, Girish Patel is showing off a neat twin rig to Colin Clay. Barry Aldous chats with Mary Paul and David Ford with Mary Bryce. Keith Webb, Reg Linsell and Jeff Ogram discuss a table of images, whilst Robin Williams offers me an anaglyph filter for my camera. Tim Goldsmith, Greg Foster, Adrian Forno and Colin Metherill all round the stereo cards table. Pam Blake, Bob Aldridge and Andrew Hurst. Girish Patel and John Ralph. It came off in me hand, Gov. Neville Jackson and Keith Webb discuss Mike Fisher's mounting jig. Colin Clay and Reg Linsell. Ken Ford, David Ford, Reg Linsell, Peter Bryce and Brian Paget. The projection team of Andrew Hurst and Robin Williams all ready to go. My projector rack is in the foreground. After the session, Audio Man Robin seems to have a stereo message for me. Harry Atkinson and John Christian in discussion. To the left, John Taylor with Carl Willits. John Savage, in blue, and Michael Dowman. David Ford and Mary Hilliard. Dennis and Lillian Sedgley with Patricia Morton. Bernard Brown talking with Ken and Diane Ford. Jane Price, Keith Webb, Colin Clay, Jeff Ogram and George Sage. They are all watching something, except Keith, who seems concerned about my camera. Phil Palmer is showing his Sony Bloggie to John Christian, David Berder and Reg Linsell. Francis and Moira Heath comparing notes with David Ford after another enjoyable projection session. The outing was to Newstead Abbey. Yet another monastery dissolved by Henry VIII and put to new purpose. The chatty gardener has a wiry build. Then off again to Papplewick Pumping Station to see some fine James Watt steam engines. My people shots in Cirencester are all outdoors. Here, Phil Palmer and David Ford in discussion. Robin Williams, Ron Kohler and Catherine Nunn enjoying a few minutes of peace. Nikolai Bazov is behind. Jeff Ogram and John Ralph. Greg Foster's camera meets mine head on. Derek Wardle is on the right. Mary Paul is talking with Bob Price and Shirley and Guy Knight. Colin Metherill and Greg Foster. Behind are the chimneys of the Royal Agricultural College. Clive and Trish Essery talking with Mary Hilliard. Outside Boutfloor Hall, John Bailey, Kelvin Richardson, Madrula Dixit Richardson, Pam Blake and Hilary Bailey. Pam Blake and Bernard Brown having their photo taken. Hilary Bailey sharing the result. Pam and Bernard seem pleased. The Sunday outing was first to Westonbirt Arboretum. Listening to the guide are Stephen O'Neill, Pam Blake, Carol Foster, Francis and Moira Heath, Lance Potter and Jeff Ogram. A slightly larger group with the Westonbirt guide. Next, we moved to Chavanage House for a guided tour. David Losley Williams and his family presented the history of their estate. And this was greatly enjoyed by members. One of many indoor shots taken on the tour. The 2014 convention was held at the Windermere Hydro Hotel. We started our weekend with a visit to Blackwell, an arts and crafts style house designed by Bailey Scott. Typical room furnishing and furniture. Frank Lawrence came along with us on this visit, and he also joined us for a scenic drive around the area. At Bowness, my people shots were limited to a couple taken when the group shot was being organised. A bit random, but lots of familiar faces. Sunday's outing was firstly to the Lakeland Motor Museum, which has a great collection of vintage vehicles. Just look at these great motorcycles. The museum also celebrates land and water speed aces Sir Malcolm Campbell and his son Donald. Enjoying this display are Barry and Edna Aldous, My Mary and Jeff Ogram. Sir Malcolm's Bluebird land speed record car, Donald Campbell's hydroplane Bluebird. Next we moved on to Holker Hall, a beautiful house set in formal gardens and parkland. Soft, warm-coloured stone and verdant greens. Blossom carpet around the fountain. On the Monday, we visited the nearby lakeshore with rowing boats for hire, but spotted the possibility of a lake trip on this vintage steamer. On board with Hugh and Anita Willman and my wife Mary. Also nearby was the world of Beatrix Potter. This is Jemima Puddleduck. More Beatrix Potter characters. In Canterbury we stayed on the university campus. It was a bus ride or a pleasant walk into the city, and here we see David Ford and Adrian Forno setting out toward the cathedral. Although not on the programme, no visit to Canterbury is complete without a visit to the cathedral. View inside the Bell Harry Tower. View east from the presbytery. Detail at the crossing. The outing started with a visit to Shepherd Neame Brewery in Faversham, Britain's oldest brewer. Here we have Kevin Harvey, David Starkman and Clive Essery, with Gisela and Stefan Will and Phil Palmer behind, all waiting in the foyer. This is the start of the tour, the same folk with my wife Mary and the guide in the foreground. Further into the tour with Catherine Nunn and Ron Kohler, George Sage and behind Bob Aldridge. Bringing up the rear in this group is Stephen O'Neill, complete with Dayglow jacket. Stereographers Kevin Harvey and Andrew Hurst at work. And now on to the best bit, sampling the beers. David Starkman with Dana Kubik and Mark Leffler. A walk around Faversham found this Thames barge, Henry. In the afternoon we moved on to Queck's house, where the group photo was taken. See who you can recognise. Then there was the Queck's house visit. By the staircase are Trish and Clive Essery, Ray Macmillan, Francis and Moira Heath, Mark Leffler, David Robinson and Dana Kubik. And these characters are part of the Powell Cotton collection, housed at Queck's. At Rochester, after the convention, Andrew Hurst and my wife Mary relaxing with an ice cream. We started our convention trip with a visit to High Force on the River Tees. We went with Frank Lawrence and Mary Paul, but Mary escaped the photo. This was followed by a visit to the Railway Museum at Shildon, where we found this rebuild of Timothy Hackworth's loco Sans Pareil, one of Rocket's competitors at the Rainhill Trials. But the main outing was to Beamish Open Air Museum. Here, several stereographers are approaching the entrance. The tram circuit is a big feature at Beamish, connecting all of the main areas of the site. Here, Stephen O'Neill and his wife Glenys are leaving the tram to be greeted by David Starkman. Here is a period dentist's surgery. Note the treadle-operated dental drill. Ouch! The garage is full of vintage engineering kit. On the main street we are greeted by Barry and Edna Alders. Uh-oh, here comes trouble. Seeing these veteran colliery loco rebuilds was a real treat at Pocklington Wagonway. This is Steam Elephant. And this one, Hetton Lion. George and Robert Stevenson's Locomotion No. 1 was built for the Stockton and Darlington Railway. And this is William Headley's Puffing Billy of 1813. At Cardiff, I was able to take some pictures around the AGM. Members of the committee: Jeff Hallett, Colin Metherell, Mary Paul and Harry Atkinson. Frank Lawrence in discussion with Stephen O'Neill. Colin Metherell speaking with Jeff Hallett. Barry and Edna Aldous talking with Phil Palmer. Nikolai Bazov and Jeff Ogram discussing Nikolai's mobile phone-based viewer. And Jeff gets to try it out. John Ralph showing equipment to David Rosenberg and John Bailey. Mary Paul and Maciek Samulski having a chat over coffee. My wife Mary with Stephen O'Neill. And now with Frank Lawrence and Mary Paul. Andrew Bloxham and Greg Foster. Bob Aldridge and Francis Heath with coffees. Harry Atkinson and Stephen O'Neill. The venue's close proximity to Cardiff Castle made a visit there inevitable. This is the Mott and Bailey Castle. And this is the later buildings with the Principality Stadium behind. The Gothic Revival interior by William Burgess is quite amazing. The outings started with a visit to Caerphilly Castle, second in size in the UK only to Windsor. Daisies and geese. Martin Williams. A late arrival? In the afternoon we visited St Fagans, arguably the Welsh version of Beamish. With many rescued buildings from around Wales, some with fascinating interiors. Check out the roof structure here. And this chemist's shop. Here we have a working smithy. And here a live loom. On the Monday, some of us took the opportunity to take a trip around the bay. With us, Greg and Carol Foster. The Pierhead building with the Wales Millennium Centre behind and the Welsh Parliament or Senedd to the right. The 2018 convention was held at the Palace Hotel in Buxton, a stone's throw from the Pavilion Gardens where we find Brian Paget enjoying the ambience. Before heading off on the Sunday outing, we were joined in the coach by Susan Pinsky, who took another of her excellent series of busload of 3D nuts pictures. The outing was to historic Haddon Hall, probably the finest example of a fortified manor house anywhere. Here, members are gathering in the main courtyard. We have Colin Metherell, Mary Hilliard, John Christian, our guide, Bob Price, Mary Paul and Harry Atkinson behind. The same group has gathered in this long gallery. Plenty of three-dimensional features to photograph. Now, emerging into the garden, this is the same group, joined now by Jane Price, Glenys O'Neill and, we think, Richard Stevens and Barbara Sanger. The gardens are on several levels, as indeed is the manor house. My Mary and David Ford provide the foreground. Returning via that long gallery, members take the opportunity to listen to a chamber concert. I can spot Francis and Moira Heath and Jeff Ogram amongst those seated. After leaving the hall, we went to Bakewell for lunch and then departed on a Peak District scenic drive. This stop was at Monsell Head and provided a fine view over Monsell Dale and the old Midland Railway viaduct. From the same spot, John Taylor, Phil Palmer, Edna Aldous, Roy Ashcroft, Maciek Samulski, Mary Paul, Stephen O'Neill, Barry Aldous and Jeff Ogram. And, a few minutes later, mostly the same folk. This is where the cameras were pointing. On the Monday, there was a walk arranged in Monsell Dale. Deep discussion on a particular view here. 2 Czech stereographers? Well, actually 1 Brit, Colin Metherill, and 1 honorary Swiss, Stephen O'Neill. The 2019 convention was held at the Dolphin Mercure Hotel, where we had a rather long, thin room requiring 3 sets of loudspeakers. This was the projection setup. And this was the screen end of the room, with David Ford, Jeff Ogram and Barry Aldous helping with the final setup. The outing on Sunday included a visit to Buckler's Hard, where ships of Nelson's Navy were built. Here, a party of stereographers is heading down to the Beaulieu River. And here is the group photo. See who you can recognise. Next, we moved to the National Motor Museum at Beaulieu, where a huge variety of historic vehicles were on display. I was very taken by this veteran Bugatti. Just look at that signature. And great brass work. We visited the church, a survivor of Beaulieu Abbey, dissolved like so many others under Henry VIII, and enjoyed the topiary in the gardens. The house is a spectacular 16th century building, with an equally grand interior. On the Monday, some of us visited Exbury Gardens and enjoyed the narrow gauge steam railway. The azaleas and rhododendrons were spectacular. Colin Metherill caught snapping. Wonderful reflections, and that is probably a good place to end.